Someone You Should Know. A program about people you know and even more that you don't. Hosted by Stuart Sax, veteran, husband, father, and grandfather. Now, here's your host, Stuart Sax.
Well, welcome to another edition of Someone You Should Know. As always, it's glad to have you with us, whether you're watching this show live when we're doing it, or whether you're just going into one of the platforms to follow us. I thank you very, very much. We very much appreciate it. Please let us know what you think, and if there are things that you want to see us do on this program, or people that you want me to have a discussion with. That's my passion. I love doing it. And another thing that I love doing is to talk to you about our sponsors, No Sweat Experts. If you need heating and air conditioning services, it's in the DFW area, and you need No Sweat Experts. They do what other companies don't do, and that is they come out and visit you 4 times a year for your maintenance plan. That means you're going to get better service more often. So check them out. Contact them, have them come out to your shop. And also to my dear friend and producer, Christine Dean of DFW Networking. She is the DFW Networking diva. That's the most important word there, diva, and ada.com, and you can reach her. She's available for a free consultation. She can help you take your business to the next level. And I'm talking about marketing. I'm talking about website design. She does it all. Thank you very, very much for producing the show. Christine, you are an absolute angel. And I have another angel with me. And I use that term kind of, in a few different ways, because this angel does fly everywhere, because she is a term that I have heard throughout my lifetime and never really knew what a nomad was. But Anya Overmann is with me as my special guest. I welcome you, Anya. She is a self-proclaimed nomad. And for those that kind of know, nomad is somebody that moves from country to country. That's what she does. In fact, where are you located right now?
I'm in Bogota, Colombia.
Bogota, Colombia. And okay, so the next question that I'm sure that my listeners and viewers are saying is, well, what the heck are you doing in Bogota, Colombia? And what is a nomad?
Sure. So I guess I'll answer the latter question first. A nomad is specifically a digital nomad. A digital nomad is someone who has the capability of working remotely, only needs a Wi-Fi connection and a laptop to do their work. And can travel freely around the world as they do it. And traditionally, a digital nomad does not have a fixed residence. And that's true of me as well. I no longer have a place that I call home. Now, wherever I go is home. So that's kind of the gist of a digital nomad. And I'm a writer, so I just need my laptop and a Wi-Fi connection to work for my clients. And I'm in Colombia because it's actually been on my list for a while to visit. I've found it very interesting as a place. And I have some acquaintances here who are kind enough to guide my partner and I around as we're here and kind of give us the ins and outs and teach us some Colombian slang as well while we're here. So, yeah.
So you said you have no residence, so you don't have like a home of record. Your home of record is your suitcase. So how does that work? And a real follow-up question to that is, how has it worked over the last couple of years with COVID?
Sure. So I started doing this in August 2020, which is smack dab right in the middle of the pandemic. And there were a few reasons for doing that. I actually had been wanting to do this for several years. I'd been gearing up to do it and kind of just holding off and saying, maybe I just need to save up a little bit more money first, and kind of just making excuses for myself for not doing it. Now, I should clarify that I do technically have a residence. I have an address on file so that I can receive mail and vote and, have an address, because I also have my own business and need to have a business address as well. So that address is my parents' address in St. Louis, Missouri. So I do technically have an address, but I don't live there. So yeah, that's kind of how I've made it work. So, if I need my ballot shipped somewhere, it goes to my parents first. And then my mother is kind enough to open my mail for me and let me know what I have. So, and there's actually a service that does that for nomads that do not have very kind parents to do that for them. So, yeah.
Are there nomads that are like a group of nomads, like a meetup type group?
Yeah, there's several groups
Really?
of that nature. Yeah, they're scattered all over the place, and they all have kind of different interests. And a lot of them kind of start. There's several programs, but there's a program called Remote Year. And I've met a lot of nomads that got their start doing the nomad life through this program that is structured so that you're living with other nomads and kind of moving from place to place every month. So that's a great way for people to get their feet wet if they have the finances for it, and because that program is a little bit expensive compared to kind of the way my partner and I travel. So it sort of just depends on what you're looking for. But yeah, there are groups of nomads that travel around together as well.
So you said you'd been doing this for a little more than a year now.
Yeah.
What were you doing prior to that? What was your upbringing? You said you're from St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
I left a lot of money in St. Louis because my son went to St. Louis University. So I spent a fair amount of time there visiting him. But so you grew up in St. Louis, and what did you study, and what has your career been up until this decision to become a nomad full time?
Sure. So I am a classic Missourian. I grew up in St. Louis, and then I ended up going to one of the state schools, Truman State University, where I got my degree in public communication. And once I left, I went back to St. Louis and started working for my uncle, who has a gymnastics business there. And I went into both marketing and also teaching gymnastics, which are two very different things. But I was kind of trying to wear all the hats and get a sense for what it takes to run that kind of business. So I was doing that for several years. And then parallel to that, I was doing writing work on the side, just picking up gigs and kind of getting my feet wet in the freelance world. And then back in 2017, I decided to launch my own business and started getting more regular clientele for writing. And it was actually the beginning of the pandemic that I broke away from working at the gyms for my uncle and really dove into my own business full time. So I have been doing this for a while, but it wasn't until the pandemic started that I really took the leap into doing this all the time.
And you are a ghostwriter, and
Yes.
and some people may not know exactly what a ghostwriter is. So please, I want you to elaborate a little bit on what a ghostwriter is and why it is so fascinating to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So a ghostwriter is a person that writes on behalf of an author. So the book is by that author, but they've hired someone to write and just basically put their ideas together in a way that is more readable. So that's what I have been doing for several years. That wasn't what I started doing with writing. I was more marketing focused, and I still do marketing writing as well. But I do make that distinction because they are two very different kinds of writing. And sorry, what was your other question about that?
Gee, damned if I remember.
Okay.
No, just the fascination of being a ghostwriter. Look, some people would say, well, why are you a ghostwriter? Why don't you just write under your own name?
Yeah, that's a valid question. I do intend to write under my own name. I do write under my own name with my blog, but I intend to write something longer form and really get into writing books myself once I've, kind of had some more experience and with clients and I find it easier to write in other people's voices than my own sometimes. So that's kind of why I've been holding back.
And all of those people that you're writing for, I mean, I can understand, because there's probably millions of people that say, someday I'm going to write a book.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, you all want to, and maybe you have the reference material to put it together, but you don't have a clue as to how to do it. And obviously that must be one of the reasons why somebody who does put together a transcript and sends it to a publisher and it gets rejected, it's because it's probably a good story, but it's not well organized.
Yeah, that is the case a lot of the time, and they just haven't run their eyes over it enough times and edit it to a place where a publisher says, yeah, this is great, let's go. So yeah, I mean, and it's tough kind of organizing your ideas and essentially getting out of your own head and being able to see that story from someone else's perspective. It's hard to think from the reader's shoes. That's why it's helpful for someone like me to come in and kind of Sherpa that story from writer to reader, so that it's easier for the reader to understand that story and really consume it in a way that is meaningful.
You're young. And I think that there are some people that would say, wait a minute, she's much too young to have all of this knowledge and to be able to be a ghostwriter and all. It's a talent. It's a talent in itself to be able to do that. And will you be a ghostwriter, whatever the genre, the material is? In other words, somebody wants to write a mystery, somebody else wants to write a reference book, somebody else wants. Do you focus in certain areas of ghostwriting, or you will write for any genre?
I'm not really limited to a genre. The way that I go about working with people, it depends more on the connection between me and them. I find it's much easier to write for someone where myself and that person have a really good connection and communicate well, because if we communicate well, I'm able to do my work better for them. And I produce, it's more in alignment with what they want, and it's more in alignment with what a reader would pick up and read. So that's kind of how I go about working with people and finding the right clients is the connection that we have, and whether I think I can pull off that topic or not is a little bit less important than that connection.
That would sometimes mean that you would have to do a little bit of your own research into it too, in order to figure out exactly what direction to take that book. The modern technology, of course, has allowed you, being a nomad, to do this anywhere, anytime. So if you're in a foreign country, you could be writing an American novel for somebody while you're sitting in a foreign country, and take as much time as you need. And that, to me, is kind of the exciting part, is because you could work 12 or 14 or 16 hours straight because it's flowing, and then you might say, you know what, I'm not going to touch this for another 2 or 3 days. I'm just going to go sightsee.
Yeah, exactly. And you really kind of described my day-to-day life pretty well. I mean, I'm not the kind of person that likes waking up and having the same day that I had yesterday. I like having a completely different day, and I go entirely based off my creative flow. And if it's not there that day, then I don't push it. And that's why I schedule a lot of buffer time and manage expectations with my clients in a way so that I can build in that time to say, you know what, today's not the day to write. I'm going to go do some other activities. I'll pick it up tomorrow and see if I got the creative flow. And that way, that frees up time for me to do, those long writing sprees, or to just say, nope, not today. So it's very different than the traditional 9 to 5, but I've learned I used to try and force my creative flow into those hourly structures, and it doesn't work that well. So this is a much better fluid lifestyle to facilitate that kind of work.
And I think what you said is very true, because I think that's the formula for burnout for a lot of people who 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, have to sit there and do that same creative job. The juices just dry up after a while.
They really do. Yeah.
I think it's fair to say that you are probably living an awful lot of people's dreams.
That's what I'm told. Yeah. I mean, and I won't lie, it's pretty awesome. I'm loving it. And I just have it reaffirmed constantly that this is exactly the life I want to be living.
Is it fair to say that there's a book in this?
I would say so. I've been asked that several times, and I feel like I'm in the middle of it right now. I'm living the middle of the story. So I'm kind of, doing a little bit more living and experiencing before I sit down and try to draft something out.
So where do your travels take you? Do you say, get up in the morning and be in one country and say, I think next I'd like to go to this country? Or do you, is it a double-edged sword? You also find that there's a client that connects with you and says, can you come to Portugal or can you come to Austria and sit down? I want to talk to you about doing this.
So there's several considerations that come into play here. So first of all, COVID has really guided where my partner and I travel to. We actually left the US back in August 2020, seeking out a place that was managing the pandemic better than the US and also had, better restrictions. So we ended up in Croatia first.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that was interesting because we were a little naive going into it, believing, well, yeah, they have these restrictions. So of course, and we were looking at the numbers as well, thinking, the numbers are lower, their case count's low, they have a nationwide mask mandate, then, it feels like it's going to be safe. But we got there, and what we didn't quite realize until we got there is that there's a cultural mindset towards those rules. And I apologize for the sirens. I'm right by a busy Bogota street. Getting a glimpse of Bogota life in the background. Anyway, so yeah, the Croatian mindset around masks kind of varied because it was the government that was saying, hey, you need to wear masks. And this is a relatively young country that swung out of communism just 30 plus years ago.
Right.
So they're very suspicious of corruption in the government, and there's a lot of distrust. And that makes a lot of sense when you think about it. And you're like, okay, well, from a historical standpoint, it makes a lot of sense that you're skeptical. But yeah, so that was just not something that we could know before we got there. And it wasn't until we really processed, there's another factor that we have to take into account around COVID. There's cultural mindsets around these rules, and the rules don't dictate how people are going to behave. The mindset is. So that's an interesting thing that's been guiding us around the world. There are certain places that are open to U.S. citizens. There are certain places that aren't. And so that's largely guided it. Another factor is the weather. We love to chase warm weather. We were in Madrid for about a week, a few weeks ago, and that was the coldest place we'd been to for a while. Cold enough to see your breath.
You grew up in St. Louis. Come on.
I know. And that's part of the reason I wanted to escape winter. I've seen some brutal winters, and I really wanted to get away from that. So that's another factor. And then cost is another factor. What's great about Bogota is, the cost of living here is just a lot more affordable. We're staying in one of the more expensive neighborhoods, but it's by US standards, not expensive at all. And then the last factor I'll note is that I'm actually president of Young Humanist International, and I occasionally will have board meetings, mostly in Europe. So that's actually why I end up going back to Europe a decent amount of time. So my last board meeting was in London over Halloween weekend. So I was out in that area. And then I have another one in Rome in February. So that also guides some of my travel as well.
Well, it was on my list of notes to discuss with you as the Young Humanist Association. And share with the audience a little bit about, you have been a humanist for a long time, and you have risen to the presidency of this organization. And what is it all about, and what do people have to know about it to appreciate it?
Sure. So I grew up humanist for all intents and purposes. I had two Catholic parents that kind of decided, Catholicism, not really for us. And they decided to raise my younger brother and I without religion. But as we got a little bit older, they realized, oh, we kind of would like our children to know about religion. So they ended up finding a place called the Ethical Society of St. Louis, which is, the best way to describe that is a church without the religion. So it's got the community aspects, it's got the community support, but it's very secular. So there's no religion. There's an acceptance of religion. You can certainly come if you're religious, but the focus is deed before creed. That's the motto of ethical culture. So doing good is a much higher priority and way more important than the belief that's led you to your action. So that is something that I've carried with me through life. And frankly, that's probably what took me to the role I'm in now. I was very involved with humanist groups throughout the US growing up, and just got more and more involved into my young adulthood. And humanism is, for those of the people that don't know, which is probably most people, there's kind of two aspects to humanism. The first aspect is the secularism that I've described. And the second aspect is human rights. And the human rights is fundamental, and both of those things are very important. And there's internal debates within the humanist community about which of those aspects deserves more weight. And if you tune into to some of the talks that I give about that, there are some really interesting generational divides there. So that's humanism in a nutshell. I ended up president of Young Humanist International, which Humanist International is the umbrella organization that has many members around the world as involved. And Young Humanists is the 18 to 35-year-old section of that organization. So I represent the youngins. And actually in Bogota here, there is a group that I'm connecting with and getting to know, which is a really cool part of the traveling that I do, is that I get these really unique opportunities to meet up with these people and form connections. And that is something really special that I treasure about this life.
I don't think we as a society know enough about humanism and accept it and promote it. I mean, we all know that, and it's part of the humanist movement is human rights. Mm-hmm. And these are physical rights. These are Bill of Rights. These are the way we treat each other, which mm-hmm. kind of does have a little bit of a religious undertone, and all, watching out for each other and being each other's brother and sister. Human rights is something that has been around for a long, long time. And I hate to say this, but as I've gotten older, it seems like we've been slipping away from recognizing what human rights are all about. And we've got to get reconnected to it. And I'm assuming that that's what you and your organization are out there to do, is to raise awareness of human rights.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's a huge part of the work that we do. And some of the most dangerous and impactful work that my organization does is support humanists at risk. And what that means is people that live in countries where being a humanist or having ideas that even relate to humanism are so frowned upon that they risk death, or they risk being ostracized from their families. And these people often reach out to us in really dire straits. And, I get emails regularly from people that are just at the end of their rope and really, really scared for their lives. And so we provide them support for, for staying alive and for getting out of dangerous situations. And a lot of the time that ends up being helping them advocate for getting asylum in a safer country. And yeah, it's important work that we're doing. It can be really scary to be on the inside of that and see the kind of discrimination these people experience. It's very serious.
Well, and I think it's safe to say that this really should not exist in the 21st century. I mean, yes, there are countries that still adhere to old world beliefs and all, but this is modern times, folks, and things like that. I know what you're advocating for. Black rights, voting rights, women's rights, gay
Mhm.
rights. These are all rights that we have to address and move forward on. And you know, other than the other things that you're doing in marketing and in ghostwriting and all, trying to bring awareness to rights that so many of them we're born with, but we just don't practice enough.
Right.
Uh, I applaud you and for going from country to country and all to share this and spread this and learn this and write about it. Uh, it has to be gratifying for you, and when traveling from country to country, to be able to discuss this.
Yeah, it is. It is incredibly gratifying, and ending up in a place like Colombia is really interesting because while they do have humanists here, it's one of the countries that my organization identifies as being higher risk because there's a lot of discrimination against people that are not Catholic. It's a very Catholic country. So in situations like that, it's really interesting to put into perspective, the rights that you and I have as U.S. Americans. We kind of take for granted a lot of time. We're able to speak our minds freely and really go without risk in our day-to-day lives for the most part for whatever we want to say. And that's just not something that everybody is able to have the right to do around the world. They kind of have to be a lot more careful than we do.
You mentioned you mentioned travel and all. There are risks because you're going into countries that don't think maybe as freely as we do in America. Are you at all ever fearful for risking what you're doing by traveling around the world?
Yeah, I am. I am from time to time, and I'm actually a person with anxiety, so I am constantly facing my fears. But this is something that I feel it's important to take calculated risks. So it's important to understand everything that could happen, and I like following the plan for the worst and hope for the best kind of mentality.
Right.
And I think that that's a pretty good way to approach things. What's really helpful in countries like Colombia, where there is higher risk, is having connections that are already here that are willing to guide you and tell you, don't go to this neighborhood. That neighborhood's not as safe. Stay in these areas. And say, hey, tonight there's going to be this event, so watch out for these roads. It's really helpful to kind of have that local insider insight. And that's part of the reason I like to travel and to make these connections is, you just wouldn't have that otherwise. And it's very special.
Yeah, it's kind of that pebble in the brook theory. The ripple effect is to start with a small group and then make it reach out into a broader society. I asked you before we started the show and everything that you travel all over the world. How many languages do you speak? And you said, well, basically some Spanish and English. Is that a crutch for you when you travel around the world?
That's an interesting question. My partner and I talk about this a lot because we really feel like it's important when we go to a country to at least learn how to say the local greeting and to say thank you and how to say sorry. And those things I think communicate enough respect for the local language because it's not always realistic to learn the whole language while you're in a place. We were in Albania for about 3 weeks, and Albanian is only spoken in Albania, and it's a language that it's not branched off of any other language. It's entirely unique on its own. And boy, is it complicated. And, so it was just not very realistic for us to learn Albanian, but we wanted to pay respect of being in a place we're not from and say,
Right.
Hello and thank you whenever we could. So we tried to learn the bare minimum of where we are. Now, Spanish is far more practical than Albanian, so we put a lot more effort into practicing our Spanish. I'd say I'm at about maybe an A2, B1 level. I don't know if you know the kind of language measurements, but I can get around and speak okay and understand what's going on, but my written Spanish is leagues above my spoken Spanish. Probably because I'm a writer, and I get along writing in English better than I do speaking in English too.
But do you use translation apps
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, for
in order
sure.
to,
'Cause
and when you travel, I'm assuming that you seek out connections of bilingual people. In other words, in Albania, find an Albanian that also speaks relatively good English. To
yes.
that to me always has been fascinating, is to be able to travel and work with an interpreter in order to get your point across, so that you don't have to feel so inferior. And by the way, what you said earlier, you always want to be able to say hello and goodbye and that. But I think I read once where one of the most asked questions in any foreign country is, "Where is the restroom?"
Yeah.
You have to
Yeah.
learn how to say, "Where is the nearest restroom?"
Yeah, you really want to be able to say that. There's, it's a little easier in Spanish. Donde está el baño? It's
Right.
really easy to rattle off, but it's,
And you
you know,
also use international symbols,
yeah,
oh,
yeah,
there's a restroom over there.
yeah. So, I mean, it takes some practice to, to feel like, oh crap, like I'm the one that's in the minority. I'm the one that's not being understood. And then having to find other ways to communicate what you need communicated is very humbling. And it helps you kind of navigate those situations. I mean, I've been doing this for a year and a half now, and I feel far more confident being, someone that is around a bunch of other people that don't speak English than I did a year ago. I feel a lot more comfortable and confident navigating situations where English is not the main language.
So overall, what is your viewpoint of the acceptance of Americans in foreign countries?
Well, I've seen a lot of U.S. Americans come into countries and act pretty disrespectfully, and it's embarrassing. As someone that works really hard to be a good guest, my partner and I, our philosophy is we always want to treat the places we're in and the people we interact with so that we are invited guests, that we're invited back after we leave. We don't want people to say, "Oh, thank goodness they're gone. Oh my God, they were terrible."
Right.
So we really want to be invited back. And I think that a lot of people from the US don't behave that way. They behave kind of like hooligans, especially in the really hot tourist spots in Mexico. I mean, oh my gosh, it's embarrassing. So I'm really starting to get into advocating for ethical travel and, not treating the place that you're going to like it's this wild vacation destination. People live there, they're living their lives. And, when a rowdy American comes in and is disrespectful, it builds on that stereotype of Americans, and we're not that well
Exactly.
regarded around the world. So I'm trying to fight against that stereotype.
Right. And that one hooligan can set a bad taste for the locals when other people from America come, because now it's twice as hard for you to say, "Hey, wait a minute, that's an isolated incident. We're not all that way. We really want
Right.
to get to know you and share our cultures together."
Yeah, exactly. And generally people pick up on that pretty quickly that, oh, okay, they're not like that. Because
Yeah.
we're pretty friendly people. We try to be, at least. And yeah, it's important to me to behave well and respectfully, because I try to think about it from, I always try to put myself in somebody else's shoes. What would I think if I lived here and somebody like that came to where I live and behaved that way? I don't think I'd like it at all. So, thinking about it from that perspective really helps.
Yeah, I can only imagine what it is internationally, because even just nationally here, when we travel around our own country, when a Texan goes to New York City, there's a little bit of a conflict there, and sometimes it can lead to some bad feelings and bad blood. You have to be adaptable to where you're going, because they are the host, which
Yeah.
now another thing that pops into my mind is your eating habits. Are you adaptable to the local food, to all of these places? Please don't tell me you're a vegan.
Well, so it's interesting you say that. So I have been a vegetarian for, I think, close to 16 years now. But when I
Okay.
started doing this, I quickly realized how difficult it was to maintain that diet. It's hard to find veggie options everywhere. So also part of what contributed to my diet change is my partner and I are looking at living on a sailboat eventually. We're thinking about living the watery nomadic life. So that means, fish has to be part of my diet. So I
Right.
started eating more seafood and, getting more accustomed to that. And then, I started realizing, wait a minute, I'm missing out on some meat dishes that I probably would never try otherwise. So every once in a while, I'll have a little bit of meat as well. But I try to stick plant-based for the most part. And I think I'm not one of the vegetarians or vegans that's a diehard, for that diet. I think reducitarianism, I don't know if you've heard that term before, but
Right.
the idea of eating less meat, not going completely meatless, but just decreasing. I think that's a great way to approach the diet, is to just reduce your intake, and that has a better environmental impact than just one person going without meat. It's a bunch of
Well,
people
and one of the
reducing.
greatest aspects of all of these various countries that you're visiting is through their cuisine,
Mhm.
because it's different. Yes, there's certain elements in most countries, like vegetables and all, but the way they're prepared and the seasonings and the sauces and herbs that they add to it makes those things different from country to country, and that to me would be kind of fascinating.
Oh yeah, it's great. We love trying the food. The local food is just down in this part of the world. Well, really across Latin America, every Latin American country kind of has their own variant of pockets of dough with stuff inside of them.
Right.
Down here, it's empanadas and arepas, and man, I am a fan of dough pockets of things. So it's great. It's great trying that stuff.
Just open it up and fill it with whatever you got.
Yeah, it's great.
And I also am a coffee aficionado. And
Mm.
man, you must, if you drink coffee or teas, you must get some of the greatest coffees and teas around the world too.
Oh yeah, big fan of coffee. And here we are in a
In
huge coffee
Colombia.
country, and we're really excited about the coffee here. And we just bought a bag of beans that we tried at this cafe, and wow, it's just great coffee. Super excited to be in a coffee country again. Guatemala was there several months ago, and they also have some fantastic coffee there as well.
And then when you go over to Europe, you get all of the blends and the
Yeah.
flavors.
Yeah. It's interesting eating food in Europe after eating food in Latin America for several months. Is I found it was much blander than Latin American food, and I guess my palate just got really used to the spice because I kind of missed the spice while I was in Europe.
But I would imagine you are also enjoying fresher food than we maybe are used to in the States, because everything we get is processed and preserved and all to get to the markets and all, where they pick it from the ground today and it's on your plate tonight.
Yeah, I would say most places I've been, the food is on average a lot fresher, and it's pretty awesome. They don't use the same preservatives. They don't, the idea of going to the grocery store in a lot of other places outside the US is you go a few times a week. You don't just go once a week or once every 10 days like many people do in the US.
Right.
And the idea is that you're going for fresh food a few times a week to get the freshest stuff. That way you don't have to worry about it going bad because you're using it and then getting more later in the week. So that's kind of the idea.
So you're in Bogota, Colombia now. Have you already predetermined how much time you're going to spend there and then what your next destination is? Or you wake up one day and you say, I think we've done our thing here. Now where are we going to go? Do you throw a dart into a map and say this is where we're going to go next?
It's kind of a combination of things. So we're staying here until January 8th. And then we have our eyes set on a few different cities in Colombia that we'd like to go to next. We haven't picked one yet, but we like to gather as much intel as we can to make a decision. So we're looking at Medellin, we're looking at Cartagena, and we're also looking at a smaller town called Santa Marta, which is up in the north of Colombia on the Caribbean side. And it's a beach town, Cartagena. And we're trying to kind of get away from cities. We keep lately we've been in cities, which is great, but it's very fast paced, and we're looking to kind of slow it down and just take it easy for a while, and maybe pick it by the beach for a while. I think we're probably going to spend some more time in Colombia after we are done here in Bogota, but haven't decided specifically where yet.
And this, you said, was your first time to Colombia?
First time to Colombia, yes. First time in South America as well.
It's fascinating. It is fascinating that you, at a young age, have the mindset, and it's probably through your humanist upbringing, to be able to travel around the world and to be able to share this concept and learn, learning experience also, but to be able to live this kind of a lifestyle that, like I say, most of us can only dream about. Is your partner also a ghostwriter and marketer and follow the same things that you're doing too? You collaborate on a lot of this?
We do collaborate a lot. He is actually a business consultant who does work in marketing as well.
Gotcha.
So we actually end up working together on projects from time to time, and helping each other out with our businesses. And his name is Phil Gundry, and he's searchable by internet as well if you're interested in looking up his business. So we do actually work quite a bit, and we're very values aligned. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't be traveling together. So yeah, it's pretty fun.
I think it's also fascinating when you said, we're doing a lot of this travel by land now, but ultimately the goal is to get a vessel and to now see it from port to port to port to port around the waterways of the world. It's fascinating. I was just not that aware of what the nomad lifestyle was all about. But after having this conversation with you, I'm probably too old to start now, but it's certainly something for young people to say, hey, I got a choice. I either want a 9-to-5 job in a small town or a big city and make that my life's goal, or I want to be able to see the world.
Stuart, I hear you, but I don't think you should rule it out just because you're a little bit older than the average nomad. I know some retirees who have dived into this lifestyle and absolutely love it. So don't rule it out if you're.
No, well, my wife and I, through our entire marriage, have always been fascinated with cruising, and we have gone on cruises in various parts of the world, and that's the fascination we have. However, you come back to port and you get in the car and you go back to your home.
Sure.
This is a lifestyle that to you have no clue as to where you're going to be 3 months, 6 months, or a year from now.
Right.
Not only don't you know, you don't care at this
I'll figure it out. It used to stress me out kind of a lot because I like to have everything planned. But now I'm way more easygoing about it. And actually COVID kind of taught me to let go of that a little bit more, because the entry requirements for countries change all the time with the pandemic. And you really have to stay up on it and be aware.
Yeah, you have to.
And it stressed me out in the beginning because it was like, what if we book flights somewhere and then they change the rules and we can't get in? That used to stress me out. Now I think, okay, they'll change the rules and we'll figure it out. So it's made me a lot more able to kind of manage stress and uncertainty just way better than I've ever dealt with it before.
Well, you do live an exciting lifestyle. I thank you very, very much for joining me. I have to tell you, this is the first time. I mean, I've had some guests on my show from England and all. This is the first one that's talked to me from South America. So I can add that to my little bucket list too.
Nice.
And it's just been wonderful for you to be able to share your insights, what you stand for, and what you advocate for with my audience. Throughout the show, we have been showing the email address for people to reach out to you, your website, and all. And this will be on all the platforms. So we're going to promote it and have people go back and see the show and learn a little bit more about you and what you are doing, and all to spread the words. And I look forward to reading your book one day.
Well, thank you, Stuart. I really appreciate the opportunity. This has been fun.
It's been a lot of fun. Thank you very, very much. And for those that have dropped in to be with us today, I thank you very, very much for being on Someone You Should Know. Again, thank you to Anya Overmann, and thank you again to Christine Dean for producing the show. And we'll catch you again next week with another edition of Someone You Should Know.
Someone You Should Know.